Hello everyone, my name is Ed Saindon, and today I'll talk about solo vibraphone playing, specifically covering some of the tunes that Gary Burton made famous with his solo renditions, including In Your Quiet Place by Keith Jarrett, and some Jobim tunes, including Grande Amor and Chega De Saudade. Before we get into those specific tunes and concepts, I'd like to talk about the instrument in general terms, covering pedaling, dampening, and touch and sound. So with the pedal, one thing to keep in mind is when we do solo playing, not everything has to be long and filled up. We can leave space. So if you listen to a solo piano version from, let's say, Keith Jarrett or Brad Meldau, there is a lot of space in there. Using the pedal too much makes everything long and covers up the space, and you lose the sense of clarity. So that's something to be careful about. The other thing in terms of touch is make sure that we have a nice relaxed touch. We don't want it to sound forced. Don't keep a very tight grip on the mallets. Try to keep a very loose grip on the mallets. Most often I'll hear a solo vibe version where it's too forced, too loud. We create our own dynamic balance and environment when we play solo vibraphone. We're not competing with a guitar player or a drummer, so we can play as soft as we want. Keep in mind that when you do solo playing, imagine yourself recording in the studio where every little nuance, every little whisper is picked up. That's how you want to approach the solo vibraphone playing. We want a very wide dynamic range from a whisper to an accent and everything in between. We also want to shape a phrase melodically. So if we do a simple phrase, 3-4 notes, every note in that phrase has its own dynamic level, whether it's a crescendo or a diminuendo, maybe 2 accents, 1 ghost note, which is like a whisper. So you want to make sure that you have this to that and everything in between. Make sure that when you play a solo vibraphone piece that it doesn't stay flat. I hear that quite a bit where it starts at one dynamic level, stays there the whole time. You want it to have rises and fall, peaks and valleys in your solo performance. The main thing is to keep the listener engaged. So if you're playing at a big hall and Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, Keith Jarrett just came off the stage and now it's your turn to do a solo vibraphone piece, what are you going to do? You want it to make it as engaging, as interesting as what they just did. So musically it has to have a lot in there in terms of the harmony, good improv, good sound, and it has to be engaging. You have to keep the listener interested. So if it's all one dynamic level, you'll pretty much lose the listener. And again, it's all about the music. I mentioned improv. You need good language, good improv techniques. You need a good time feel. You need good harmony, good voicing. So it goes beyond technical facility. We're talking about a lot of musical elements that take time to learn and study. So sometimes you can have all the technique in the world, but if you don't know the language, the improv concepts, and the time feel is not happening, and the voicings are not happening, nothing you can do to make up for that lack of creative ability in those areas. Okay, dampening. We talked about dynamics. We also want a lot of different varied articulation from staccato, legato. When we do counterpoint or inner lines in the voicings, we want clarity. So that's where the dampening will come in. I'll do another video later on that covers dampening, but for now, just think about two-hand dampening as opposed to any specific one-hand dampening techniques. We want to make sure that we play with a sense of clarity and make sure the instrument sounds clean. So be careful of the pedaling, like I mentioned, and also when you start playing more counterpoint and more pianistically, that's where the dampening comes in. So that's super important. And I'll cover some of these things as we go through the various pieces. Just a few other considerations before I play. One is balance dynamically. So if the melody, you want the melody to really be melodic, a lot of expression, very vocal quality. You want that melody to stand out over the accompaniment. So make sure the accompaniment is soft. Many times I've just dropped the mallets and I'm not really playing too loud. Keep the height of the mallets kind of low. And again, not forced, right? Right there is some sustain even though I'm not using the pedal. So again, think about, listen for the sound. So sometimes you want it to be very staccato, or I might do a dead stroke. Sometimes I'll maybe half pedal it, or sometimes I'll pedal the whole thing. But make sure you don't pedal the left hand and sacrifice the clarity with the right hand. The melody is king in terms of dynamics and clarity. All right, so that's always a key point. I remember Gary stating that all the time. Making sure the melody is really vocal quality, stands out over the accompaniment. Sometimes if I'm doing counterpoint, I'll get away from the melody, I'll do a counterpoint. And if the line in the counterpoint is not finished, don't worry about it, get back to the melody. That melody is king. Talking about playing the instrument like a vocalist and with expression, that's the goal. We want to make this instrument sing. So the more nuance we can include in our playing in terms of articulation, touch, ghost note, accents, shaping the phrase melodically, the better this instrument will sound. Gary always referred to how would vocalists sing this tune, Sarah Vaughan or Ella Fitzgerald, that sort of thing. So that's the goal. Not even talking about solo playing is talking about how do you play the instrument with a sense of touch, good sound, clarity. Those things, whether you play in a band or you play in a duo or a solo, is probably one of the most important things that we need to work on. And these things I'm always working on myself. It never ends. Okay, more things will come up as we get into the tunes. So let's start with In Your Quiet Place by Keith Jarrett. It's more of a rock tune. Some of the things to keep in mind on this tune is you want to play the melody with a lot of expression. There's a lot of sustained notes. Feel free to embellish. If the note is sustained, we want to keep that pulse. So if the note is sustained, that's not going to help that pulse. We want to keep that groove down here. Again, it's a rock tune, so you want to make sure you keep that groove happening. If I can, the right hand will come down a lot and help out supportive voicing with the left hand. And in some cases, the right hand came down to play a counterpoint. Notice when I did that counterpoint, I was using mostly dampening to make sure that counterpoint is clean. If the counterpoint is like in thirds or chord tones, you can let those notes ring. But if the counterpoint is stepwise, like a melodic line, then you want to make sure that you dampen. One thing that Gary talked about way back in the lessons was selective dampening, where you dampen some of the notes and you let other notes ring. Let me just give you an example. Let's say we're in bar 2 of In Your Quiet Place. We have a B7 chord. And I'm playing counterpoint. I'm going to give you the notes. F sharp, E, D sharp, D, C, B. So F sharp, E, D sharp, D, C, B. So that's my counterpoint. Now what I might do is let the F sharp ring, play the E, dampen the E to the D sharp, then play the D and C. I'm going to dampen those and let the B ring. So what happens is some of the notes are dampened, some are not, which gives you nice varied articulation. And the notes that are ringing in this case are basically the chord, the triad, B, D sharp, F sharp. If I was playing more of a jazz tune and I wanted more of a jazz voicing to ring, I might let some tensions ring, but in this case I'm just letting the chord tones 1, 3, 5 ring. All right, I'll put that in context. Okay. Which is a nice effect, and you'll hear Gary Burton do that a lot in his playing. Whether he's playing solo or even if he's soloing with a band, you'll hear that selective dampening. So that's an important concept to keep in mind. I'll say, okay, so getting back to the tune, I'll keep a pulse going. And I'll just work on the melody just a little bit with you. Sometimes I'll arpeggiate the chord, sometimes I'll play the chord concerted. Sometimes I'll play maybe some counterpoint along with the concerted chord. So let's say, give you an example, I'm playing a C triad, G, C, E. Alright, so right there you're getting G, C, E, but I connected the C to the E with a D passing note. So many times I'll just use passing notes, dampen the passing notes and let the chord tones ring. So that's an important technique. It's important the hands work together. So make sure that when you're playing you don't keep the right hand exclusively up here, left hand exclusively down there. You want each hand to help each other out. That was something that Gary always talked about, and if you see him play Chega or Grande Amor or In Your Quiet Place, you'll see a lot of each hand helping the other. That's really crucial. Many times when I see students play, they keep the right hand up here, they keep the left hand up here, and the hands are not working together, which is a problem. I also see that a lot of, let's say, students will keep the time going and the changes going by only the right hand, which is not good. If the hands are working together, it's going to seem effortless, and so that's very important. So on this tune, what we're doing is we're creating constant eighth notes. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. I'm just filling in the time, constant eighth notes between the melody and the accompaniment, whether the accompaniment is an arpeggio or a counterpoint. I'm just breaking up the eighth notes between the mallets. And again, think about roles. So think about, we have the melody, we have the accompaniment, we have counterpoint. So I'm just breaking up the instrument in terms of various roles. And that's something that you want to consider. Just think of yourself as an arranger or orchestrator. We might have a violin ostinato up top, or maybe a bass section down here, or maybe a sax section playing in the middle, a concerted type figure. So I'm thinking more arranging and orchestration, which is more pianistic. We're thinking of this instrument as a piano, utilizing the 4 mallets along with the right pedaling and the right dampening. Okay. So getting into more techniques within your quiet place. Dynamics, where I might reach a peak, I might come down. The melody is singing. Everything is sort of happening, but it's effortless, and that's your goal. It takes a lot of practice to get there, but that's the goal, to make sure everything is working together. Another technique in terms of thinking like an arranger or orchestrator is maybe begin a line in the mid-range and then let that note hang if you want, jump up and begin a phrase up here, and let that hang and jump down and begin a phrase here. That sort of hides the limitation of the 3 octaves, where you're starting lines in different places, and that keeps the listener engaged and interested. Listeners thinking, okay, where's the next line going to start? Is it up top, on the bottom, that sort of thing. So think about beginning your lines, your phrases in different places on the instrument. Gary does that a lot, and we worked on that in the lessons quite a bit. Okay, so now when we talk about soloing, you want to make sure that the solo, the improv after the melody, is played with the same dynamics, the same musicality as the melody was. And the other thing is you don't want the character of the tune to change. Sometimes I'll hear a jazz performance, a solo vibe performance, and the melody sounds pretty good, but then all of a sudden I hear the solo and it completely changes in terms of the time feel, the intensity, the sound. It might be clean with the melody, and then the solo starts and we lose the clarity, more pedaling, that type of thing. So make sure that the improv is just a continuance, extension of the melody. And so keep in mind that if you're playing a tune like In Your Quiet Place with very simple phrases, bluesy phrases, you might begin your solo like that and not all of a sudden out of the gate start playing a lot of fast runs and 16th notes. Again, think musically as opposed to technical. So that's very important. Let me just show you that for a minute. Okay, I'm going to take the last 4 bars of the tune. One course of improv In Your Quiet Place, but not a lot of runs, maybe a few arpeggios with passing notes, that sort of thing. But you also heard in there a lot of motives. So one phrase leads to the other phrase, so motivic development is so important, not only on this tune, but any song. So playing with motives. And it doesn't have to be very fancy. This technique can be very diatonic. one thing I worked on with Gary is when we look at tunes, we analyze the tunes for chord scales, that sort of thing. So In Your Quiet Place, I think we figured out was maybe 2 or 3 chord scales through the whole tune. So it can be very diatonic, but that's fine. Doesn't have to be a lot of out notes. And again, sometimes when you listen to a Keith Jarrett solo, it can be very diatonic, but it's the execution, it's the sound. So that's so important to keep that in mind. So right out of the beginning of the solo. Right there, that was all one motive, and you can keep that motive going through the whole tune for the whole chorus, or maybe play the motive, leave the motive, play something else, come back to the motive. Again, more ways to keep the listener engaged. All right. Again, not technical, more musical elements. And I sometimes would say to a student, and Gary would say the same thing. Let's say you're at BPC. And Chick Corea just left the stage, or Herbie Hancock, or Keith Jarrett did a solo performance, and now it's your turn. What are you going to do to bring to the table? It has to be a lot of things you bring to the table, and not only technical, but musical in terms of improv concepts, the time feel, the voicings, the arranging. You have to bring so much to the table, which is not only technical. It's a lot of musical things that we constantly have to work on and develop our whole life. Okay, so there's more to In Your Quiet Place, but I think what I'd like to do is go on to some different tunes that Gary made famous for solo playing. One tune I'm thinking about is O Grande Amor by Carlos Jobim. And again, this is a Brazilian tune, 8th notes. So the technique we talked about with In Your Quiet Place, filling in the 8th notes, it really applies to A Grande Amor and other tunes like Chega. So what we're doing there is creating constant 8ths between the melody or the improv and the left-hand accompaniment or counterpoint. So if the melody is hanging on a whole note or half note, we have to keep that 8th note pulse going. All right. So if the melody on O Grande Amor, right, so the melody is kind of sparse, kind of long. So what I'll do there is so that was the melody. Notice if the melody is sustaining, right, so I'm playing the E, A, and then I come down and do arpeggio. But what I said before, the right hand helps the left hand helps the right. Make sure you keep doing that. So if I'm playing in O Grande Amor, right, that left hand comes up and helps with the dampening, a simple melodic phrase. And then on the other hand, right, so right there, the right hand came down to arpeggiate, or maybe execute counterpoint with dampening. So keep those hands going together. And again, I'll play with the right hand and the left hand staying separate. Right, not bad. The left hand is is filling in with the right hand, but it doesn't have that linear flow that we're talking about. So make sure that when you play, keep the left hand happening down here, but also bring it up to help with the right. The right hand is going to leave a line and come down and help with the left. When you do that, make sure that you still have the dynamic balance we talked about. So the melody or the improv has to be louder than the accompaniment or the counterpoint down here. We want to make sure that accompaniment is soft enough where we have a good dynamic range shaping our phrases in this register and while keeping this low. This is too loud, we're going to lose the dynamic possibility and the dynamic range in the right hand. And again, a melody like a Grande Amor can be very simple. You can embellish it. What I suggest sometimes with students is we work on just playing the melody with a sense of clarity, expression, and nuance and embellishment. And then once you get that happening, slowly add in some left hand, simple accompaniment, chord tones, roots, not much, but don't lose that expression with the melody. The melody is king, and that's what we worked on in a lesson Gary Burton told me all the time. Make sure the melody has a sense of expression like a vocalist, and don't lose that. So we can keep all these, oranges and apples in the air with solo playing, but if we don't have that melody singing and the clarity of the melody, it's not going to work. All right, so make sure you keep that in mind. All right, so getting back to a Grande Amor, I'll play the melody one more time, and what I'll do is I'll do a little bit more counterpoint with the left hand. All right, so that's very simple. You'll hear Gary do that a lot. So in the A minor, I'm just going C, B, A. So I hadn't mentioned this. Make sure when you do solo vibraphone playing that you sound the harmony and have a good time feel. But in this case, sound the harmony with color. So whether we play a voicing, could be 4-note voicing down here, could be 5 notes. Sometimes we'll stack a voicing. So I'll play chord tones and maybe add in some tensions, and I'm thinking 5 notes. Generally from F, the low note, to C above, middle C here. I'm thinking this is the harmonic range. But many times, even without playing a voicing down here, I can use counterpoint to bring out the tension. So it's important that when you do solo playing, you sound the harmony, but also bring out color. If we were listening to a solo piano player play a tune like a Grande Amor or a standard, and just sound the changes without any tension, it would be too bland. We never really typically hear a solo piano version where someone is just playing the changes. If it's D minor, they play D minor and no tension. And same thing with a solo vibraphonist. We want to sound the changes, but also with a lot of color and harmony. So that counterpoint will allow us to bring in some tension, and we resolve that tension. So on the A minor, I'll do that again. All right, just C, B, A. Now I keep the pedal down, so the melody is ringing. I'm playing A, C down here, and E, and then I play that counterpoint, C, B, A. But that's dampened. If I didn't dampen, it would sound like this. Which now I'm losing the clarity, plus we're not getting enough varied articulation. So the dampening is important for clarity, but also varied articulation, variety with articulation. Another thing you can do is very simple, just 2 notes with the counterpoint. I'll play the melody again. We're on A minor. And all I did was 2 notes, F to E, which F is a flat 13. That's setting up tension, resolution. Or I might play the B, 9, up to the C, the 3rd, or the D, the 11, up to the E, the 5th, or down to the C. All right, you can experiment with that. So it just is all A minor. Those tensions I just mentioned, and it could be different every time. The thing you don't want to do is work up a standard arrangement. So think about the concepts, in this case counterpoint with what we call tension resolution, or maybe the melody with arpeggios, that sort of thing. So think about concepts as opposed to working up a specific arrangement. There's so many things we can do with solo playing in terms of concepts and techniques. If you only work up an arrangement, you're limiting what you can do down the road. And we all have certain things that we like to do and fall into, and they work, but sometimes those things can get in the way. The music might want to go a different way, and there's so many other things we can be doing, so we don't want to limit ourselves with a specific arrangement. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a tune, whether it's Grande Amor, Chega, or a ballad, or a swing tune, and begin it in different time fields: slow, fast, bossa, swing. Sometimes I'll take a tune and play it in a different key. We might play certain things in a different key differently than, let's say the original. So that's always a good thing to do. See, okay, so getting back to a Grande Amor, what you'll see when Gary is playing, he's playing the melody or he's improvising. You hear a really great time feel. You hear the changes. You hear runs. You hear counterpoint. There's so much in there. If you can, when you look at Gary play, think about the techniques. Is he using counterpoint? How is he embellishing the melody? If you look at a solo version of Gary playing a Grande Amor, let's say transcribed version, which is online, if you analyze what he's playing in terms of the original melody, you'll see he's adding so much to the original melody in terms of fills and runs and embellishments of the melody. That's a study in itself. So make sure that when you do play the melody, it sounds very full, very clear, really good time feel. And then don't be afraid to add in a lot more nuance to the melody, whether it's a ghost note or runs, arpeggios to fill in the holes, that sort of thing. Okay, I'll play a little bit more on a Grande Amor and talk about some techniques, and then we'll go to Chega. So right there, towards the end of the solo, I was playing a line here, a line there, a line there, and just constantly moving it around. So that's playing different phrases in different registers. There's some other techniques I did in there, and very easy. Sixth. So that's a good technique. Sometimes I'll play thirds. So different textures. Sixths, thirds. You'll hear Gary do a lot of octaves. So that's important. Something I also think that's very crucial to work on is the mallet spread. So sometimes I'll look at a solo vibraphone performance, or in general just a four mallet player, keep first of all, this mallet back here, which is limiting, but also they'll keep the same spread, which is also very limiting. So you want to make sure that the spreads in both hands are constantly be changing, because if you're doing this all the time, you're limiting your choices in terms of voicing, and if you're doing this, you're limiting this mallet, first of all. So sometimes I'll practice close. That affects what I'm playing in terms of the voicings, the counterpoint, the improv. All right, so that's something to consider. Practice may be keeping a 45-degree spread, practice playing close, practice playing open. And again, in terms of general consideration with the four mallets, try to utilize four mallets as opposed to just two. And that's a whole other topic we can get into at a later date. But that's something to keep in mind. Don't keep a constant spread with the grip. Try to change it up. Okay, so we have textures, we have thirds, we have sixths, we have octaves. We talked about the counterpoint with the tension resolution, the dampening, the expression, the dynamic balance. There's a lot to think about in solo playing. What you might want to do as a suggestion, and I did this with Gary quite a bit, is I had a list of all the things we just talked about: dampening, pedaling, articulation, dynamics, and so forth, and make a list. And when you practice, have that list and maybe keep 2 or 3 things in mind when you practice. You can't think about 10, you won't play a note, but pick maybe 2 or 3 while you're working on that. Getting a good time feel, you're working on motives in the soloing, you're working on counterpoint with the, along with the melody, that sort of thing. So again, think smart when you practice and just don't play what you know. Pick a concept, pick a tune, pick a key, and then work on specific concepts that you have on that list. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind is when we do the left hand, we want the left hand to sound the changes. The melody sometimes will not necessarily sound the change. So when I go from A minor to, I'm thinking E7 over G sharp, or that could be a G sharp diminished, but I'm leading into certain notes. And if you look at Gary play Grande Amor and Chega, he has a lot happening. Runs, arpeggios, he's using the whole instrument, and it's the left is helping the right, right is helping the left. But if you really listen to Grande Amor, Chega, or some of those other tunes, you'll hear a foundation with those guide tones, usually in the left hand. So in this case, I'm going from A minor to G sharp. Alright, so many times what I'll do is we'll pick a tune, a student and I will work on just the left hand, outlining the changes and hitting those important chord tones and guide tones to really sound the change. And we can use chromatic passing notes, approach notes, but you can still hear the foundation, the harmony. I'll give you an example. Going A minor to the G sharp on the E7, but I'll approach that G sharp chromatically from the B. And then here, in this case, the third bar is G minor. I'm going G, D, F, D sharp to E. Arpeggios, passing notes, chromatic passing notes, approach notes, but you can hear the harmony there. So just work on sometimes just the left hand. So A minor sharp diminished, or E7 to G minor, C7. So a few different ways to practice that. I'll just play chord tones. No passing notes, no chromatic. Those were only chord tones. Sometimes I'm arpeggiating, sometimes I'll use two notes at the same time. But I'm aware of where those notes are resolving to into the next chord, and I land on those notes, so that's important. The other thing you just saw there when I did it is the spread of changing. Right, so right there on C7, for example, I'm playing G, E, and then I go B flat and C. And now I'm on B minor 7 flat 5, A, B to F, D, right? So you can do a lot with the left hand. If the left hand is happening and the left hand has a lot of variety and is always moving, it takes the pressure off the right hand. So many times I'll see someone play, they don't have that activity, those techniques with the left hand where they depend too much on the right hand for the time and the changes. If the left hand is happening, like I mentioned, takes the pressure off the right hand and the hands are working together. So I would suggest just working on a tune like a Grande Amor, Chega, Autumn Leaves, any tune. Just work on left hand alone. And I'm not talking about adding any tensions yet, just chord tones. And there's other techniques too. For example, on let's say B flat major 7, B flat and D, B flat and F, B flat and A. I'm just keeping the B flat down here. But I might go from B flat to F with a passing. That changes the spread, which is good. And it brings in a little bit of color with those passing notes. And another technique is I might go B flat and A, 7th, and just do an inversion with A and B flat, which now gets you to open and close, right? So if you look at a left-hand piano player, they're always changing left-hand voicings. They're not sticking to one voicing, usually for the whole bar. And sometimes those voicings can be 3 notes, could be 2 notes, could be guy tones. Bill Evans used to play a lot of guy tones in his left hand. Sometimes the voicing might be a little bit vague. Meldau sometimes might leave out a 3rd and just play the 9th. Chick sometimes will leave out the 3rd, just play the 9th. It gives you a different color. So I can't emphasize enough the work needed to get that left hand happening in solo playing. And again, most of these techniques I'll use in a duo or trio, or even in a band with a guitar player or a piano player. So these techniques we're not talking about are exclusive to solo vibraphone playing. Okay, there's more to Grande Amor, but let's move on to Chega. And Chega is going to be pretty much the same as O Grande Amor in terms of it's a bossa or a samba, depending on the tempo you want to take it. Filling in the 8th notes. Again, work on the melody first, where it's, make sure that melody is nice and clear, good sound, nice clarity, nice variety of articulation. You can change, again, don't make it seem like when you play a tune like Chega or any tune that you're reading it from a real book and you're playing note for note, rhythm for rhythm, the same thing. You can embellish that melody, you can change the rhythm, you can add in a note, you can change a note. You're not tied to playing a melody the same way all the time. So don't make it sound like you're reading from a real book when you play a tune like Chega, Autumn Leaves, or anything like that. Most often in a fake book, the melody is written kind of stiff, like Autumn Leaves or Stella. No one plays it that stiff. So make sure you embellish the melody. Get that melody so ingrained with your right hand that it's automatic. You can't really do much more if that right hand melody is not happening. So I would suggest just work on the right hand first. And maybe with a metronome on 2 or 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. All right, so right there, change it up. Next time you practice it, play it slow, play it fast. Don't always play the same tempo. So metronome on 2 and 4 would be good. You want to make sure that time is in the pocket and it feels good. In terms of the time feel, whether you're playing a bossa or a swing tune, you want to make sure that time feel swings and doesn't feel like it's very stiff. So a common problem with solo vibraphone playing, usually more with swing tunes, is I hear accents too much on the downbeats, which makes it very stiff. It doesn't have that forward momentum. So if, you know, a tune like Chega, the melody is great because there's a lot of rhythmic syncopation. So when you play a tune like Chega and you're improvising, you want to keep that rhythmic syncopation happening, just like the melody. And I mentioned before that when you improvise, after you do a chorus of the melody, don't change the whole atmosphere. Don't change the whole feel of the tune. You want to keep the essence of the tune like the melody. All right? So if the melody is nice and rhythmic, syncopated, nice simple phrases, you can do the same thing with your improv. It doesn't have to be a lot of fast notes, fast runs. Okay, so now getting back to the melody with the left hand, we're going to fill in the eighth notes here. Right there, I'm playing very dry with no pedal for a reason. Just to show you that just to show you that I'm just filling in the eighth notes. Alright? So you hear the clarity. You can pedal, but make sure if you start pedaling, you don't pedal the left hand accompaniment versus the right hand. The right hand melody is key, right? Now, if I do an arpeggio down here and I want to keep the pedal down, I can do that because it's arpeggio. If I start doing lines, like scalar type lines, I have to be careful of using too much pedal because I'll lose the clarity. So again, we can use selective dampening. So let's say D minor. Right, so D minor, I'm playing A, G, F, E, D, C, but I'll dampen the G when I go to the F, I'll dampen the E when I go to the D, so the result is I get just a basic chord sound, where I'm playing a scalar line, but the resulting chord is just D minor, okay? So if you do scalar type lines for your counterpoint, make sure you use selective dampening. You don't have to dampen every note, but dampen some of the notes, otherwise it's a big blur. The other thing with selective dampening is you get that nice varied articulation, okay? Okay, so getting back to the filling in the eighth notes, I'll do it a little bit slower. 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. Very simple. Sometimes I use an arpeggio, sometimes I use counterpoint. Can vary a lot. One thing I just did at the end, instead of going to E7, I did a chromatic approach, like what we call a sub 5/7 or a 5/7, going to E7. So I went A and D sharp to G sharp and D, right? Right there. So instead of going to 2 bars of E7 in measures 3 and 4, I approached the E7 with a 5 of its own, so B7. You'll hear that a lot in Chega and also Grande Amor from Gary. And again, these are things that Bill Evans did all the time. You'll hear Bill Evans use a lot of sub 5s and 2 5s going to a certain chord. There's so many things to talk about. One thing I'm just thinking about now is knowledge of harmony. When we play a tune like a Grande Amor, Chega, Autumn Leaves, we want to know harmonically what's happening. Major key, minor key, where does it go in the bridge, that sort of thing. We also want to know a lot of the harmonic substitutions and techniques that piano players do all the time, using a chromatic approach chord, substituting a chord for another chord, that type of thing. So knowledge of harmony is crucial. Whether you do solo playing, if you're playing in a band, it's so important. And not only knowing the theory, but knowing the sound of the concept, knowing the sound of the harmonic technique you're dealing with. Okay, so getting back to Chega, we're filling in the eighth notes, making sure the melody is really, really clear. Let's talk about improv on Chega. And sometimes when you look at Gary, there's so much happening. Like I mentioned, runs, arpeggios, third, sixth, we talked about octaves, that type of thing. But try to break it down in terms of musical elements. Is he playing arpeggios for his improv? What is his left hand doing? That sort of thing. So some of the things we talked about on Grande Amor, like playing guide tones in the left hand, he's doing on Chega. But on top of that, you have the runs, you have the little fills, that sort of thing. Again, you can do this on any tune. You might want to take another Jobim tune like How Insensitive or Tree Stay and just work on the concepts we talked about in the video here and apply them to that tune. Again, don't work up an arrangement, just think concepts. And slowly you get to a point where you can improvise a solo piece on the spot and come up with these things and sound pretty good. Sometimes I'll be playing a solo piece and I might get into trouble, but I have enough techniques now where I can usually get out of trouble and come up with something that sounds decent, right? But again, this has been a long process, and the process is the key. So if you only work on an arrangement, let's say you have an arrangement of 5 tunes, it's too limiting. You want to be able to play different tunes, different keys, different time feels, and don't have a preconceived idea of how you're going to play that tune. So I might play El Grande Amor slow, I might play it in a different key, I might start the melody down an octave, I might start the melody up there. Again, I'm thinking arranging, orchestration. And I think that's so important. And again, listen to piano players like Bill Evans, Keith Jarrett, Chick Corea, Art Tatum, Teddy Wilson, George Shearing, Dave McKenna. There's a whole list of great piano players, old and new, that you can really steal from and try to duplicate what they do. We can't do it exactly, but we can simulate many times and get away from the limitations of the instrument. Okay, so let's get back to Chega. We'll talk about soloing, and what I'll do now is I'll just solo on the tune using chord tones and passing notes. So you should be able to hear the changes just with the melody. And I'll just do the melody. I won't do the accompaniment first, okay? And again, just chord tones with simple passing notes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. sounding the changes, rhythmic syncopation, and just using passing notes. So right at the get-go, I play, I'm just thinking D minor, and I'm just using a passing note from F to E. Very simple. You might work on that with the metronome on 2 and 4, and just sound simple melody, simple melodic phrases with space, using syncopation. And again, touch, accents, ghost notes. So a simple phrase that had a lot of nuance to it as opposed to flat. All right. So again, listen to Keith Jarrett when he plays simple phrases. It's how he plays those phrases with the dynamics. So I'll do that again, and metronome on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Motive, right? So as you play like that, you'll start hearing a certain phrase, a certain motive. Try to keep that motive going. That keeps the listener engaged. That's, again, so important. Okay, so I'll do that again. I'm going to stick to improv, outlining the change with some passing notes, and I'll slowly add in the left hand. So we talked about on Grande Amor how we're playing certain chord tones, certain guide tones to sound the changes. Same thing with Chega. So Chega is D minor. Now we go to E7. Now when I go to E minor 7 flat 5 in bar 5, I'm going to connect the B to the B flat on the E minor 7 flat 5 to the G. Now I'm going to pick up the E and I'm going to lead into the C sharp. All right, so I'll put that in context. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So now you can start hearing the changes just with the left hand. So if the left hand is active and it's moving around with the right hand playing simple melodies, it'll sound good. If the left hand accompaniment is sounding the changes, that does allow me to play more linear fragments in the right hand, so less sounding the changes. Let me give you an example of that. Let's say on D minor, I'm thinking D Aeolian. And I'm just going to play a simple phrase in D minor Aeolian with the changes. I'll do that again. So anything I play, I can just play thirds coming down, I can play sixth coming down. So the line here is not necessarily sounding the changes, but my left hand in this case is sounding more of the change. So that's something to consider. So the goal is, whether you're playing the changes in the right hand or the changes in the left hand, that you're sounding the changes of the tune with a good time feel, a good sound, and also some color we mentioned earlier. So make sure that when you play a tune like Chega or a ballad or 3/4 tune, anything like that, you're sounding the changes with a good time feel, but also with some color. And referring back to a solo piano performance, you wouldn't hear a solo piano player play with just the bland D minor 7, G7, C major chords. We're going to add some color, and that's so important for us as well. Okay, I'll get back to the soloing with the right hand and some left hand. developing, listening to a motive, keeping the motive going. There's no preconceived idea as far as left hand stuff, right hand stuff. I'm just letting it go. And at this point, I'm just evolving. I don't know where it's going to go. And just, you want to be open to all the possibilities. So again, don't work on a specific arrangement. In there, I was throwing in a few runs. Once you get the foundation of the left hand and the right hand, then you can start embellishing with runs, arpeggios, thirds, sixths, octaves, that type of thing that we talked about. Oh yeah, there's one technique too that Gary mentioned quite a bit, and that was dual function left hand. Whereas we're playing lines with these two mallets or these two mallets or these three, and this mallet here is functioning as accompaniment. So I'll give an example on that. When I got to the D7, if I play that line. Now what I'm going to do is whenever I play this mallet as part of that line, I'm adding this mallet underneath. Right, so if I take that to at the top, I'm just playing eighth note type lines with these two mallets. It could be these two, and this, whenever this mallet plays, I'm adding a chord tone, generally a chord tone underneath. The nice thing about that technique is we can play fast lines, two-hand lines, but still get the sound of a accompaniment underneath. So that's called dual function left hand. All of these techniques that I talked about today will be in the book that's upcoming that we're proofing at this point. And it's a book on solo vibraphone playing, so stay tuned for that. Okay, I think there's a lot more we can talk about, and I'll do more videos in the future. We can continue with the solo vibraphone playing, Gary's concepts, as well as some other concepts. What I'd like to do is talk about solo vibraphone playing for ballads, 3/4 tunes, swing tunes, and after that we'll get into maybe some dampening techniques and some other techniques we can talk about. But I think for today that's probably good enough. If there's any questions, feel free just to text me or send me a message via Facebook, or feel free to send a question by email at Saindon@gmail.com. All right, thanks for tuning in. Bye.